Alright guys, I am gonna finally start a restoration on this bench grinder. As you can see there, it is pretty rough and it is pretty beat up. Paid $25 for this at an estate sale. And a couple things that stand out to me is here, as you can see, that is going to need some work on the gooseneck there. It looks like there is a problem with the switch and it's taped up. So that's definitely concerning. Obviously, these grinding wheels are pretty much old and shot, so they're going to have to be replaced. And this badge itself, as you can see there, is really beat up as well. You can barely make out the model number there, which I was able to. And it's a 1964, I believe, from what I can tell. And I'll print out the owner's manual and share that with you guys. The other thing I was really curious about is the original color. And this looks like it's got a copper color, but the original color, I believe, is black and silver. So I think I'm going to try to restore it to the original color, and I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with that badge because it looks pretty beat up. So this model was known as the Tombstone, and it's a pretty cool name, and we'll see if we could make it look and live up to its reputation. But I do want to just turn it on for you so you could hear it run prior to restoring it. And another thing I should mention that's definitely shot on this is the cord. It is dry rotted to death. So let's turn it on and hear how it sounds. So it sounds pretty good. As you can tell, I turned it off, and this thing takes a while to unwind. That makes me feel like the bearings are in really good shape. They may need a little grease. That could be the reason why they're spinning so freely as well. Hopefully the bearings are going to be able to be repacked, and that'll save me some money on the project and keep it original. Now it's time to break it down.
So went right at it. Just started taking off any nuts that was on visible, and took the shields off. Some of it could come off by hand, obviously, the shields. And I used a nut driver on this project a lot. It was nice to use a nut driver. I don't use them often, but it just worked out really well here. It was much easier than using a ratchet or a wrench. The wires, yeah, just, finagled them a little bit. Had to use a pliers on them here to kind of get them off. There I did have to use a ratchet to get in there because it was a tight little head. Still not pulling apart there. Well, I figured out why. Let me pull that visor out of the way. Had to get the wheels off, and they were on there pretty good even after I had the nuts off. And be careful with the reverse thread, they're always a little tricky. Had to pry the wheels off. Once I got the wheels off, it came right apart. And here I'm just banging out the spindle. Banged on that a little bit, and then realized, whoops, had a couple more screws that needed to come out, and then came out real easy.
All right, this is it, all broken down. A couple of things I just wanted to show you, which is really cool, is that this is actually aluminum, guys. The whole body of this and the whole shell is super light, and it is made out of aluminum. That is awesome. What else? Oh, just say I took apart the lamp here. You could see that it was, I don't know if it was painted. This definitely was painted at one point, but I'll have to figure out what color I want to paint it now. Took off a ton of tape on this, and I'm not sure why it had all the tape on it. The switch seems to work. I'll have to play with that, put it on some electric prior to rewiring it, and make sure it works. The wheels themselves were the original wheels. These were the Craftsman branding on it, and they are beat, and they absorb the smell of a basement, and they just can't wait to get rid of them, honestly. They stink, and this project just been smelling up my shop, but as I'm cleaning it and getting all the dirt out of it and the dust out of it, it seems to be dying down the smell. But it's really just turned down to a bucket of parts, and it's almost ready for primer and paint and cleaning. What's really cool is this is real glass in here, guys. That is neat. Real glass, shatterproof, double pane glass. That'll need to be cleaned up, painted, and so forth. And then the bearings I just wanted to show you. I wanted to show you kind of what that looked like. And they are not going to be able to be resealed They don't have the rubber piece on them. They look like they're sealed on both sides. I'll have to take a closer look at that once I get them off. But they move great. They just sound dry as a bone. So I'm afraid I might have to replace these. They are made in the USA. And I don't know if I'll be able to find them made in the USA anymore. I might be able to find some good quality Japanese ones. We'll see what I can find online for those. So now I'm going to clean everything up, bring it to primer and paint, and just wanted to share what, I've been using these. I've been cool. This projects are great when you get to use some new tools. I bought these USA made Husky wrenches not too long ago. Been itching to use them, and I've been using them for this project for a little bit. And these are those nut drivers I showed you. Really cool quality USA made Craftsman ones. This is just a regular one, but it had some sort of a handle on it. And then this one I've never seen before with this type of design, but that's the 3/8 one, and then mighty comfortable. Let's go to primer and paint. Before going to primer and paint, I'm going to see if I could get these bearings off. So I bought this Pittsburgh gear puller set here for $40 with the discount, and I actually made a review using it, and it's a little bit more in depth than what I'm going to show you here. So feel free to check the description, and there'll be a link in there for this video. But I thought, hey, if I could save these bearings, hey, that's $20 right out of the gate at least, and they're good quality USA made bearings. So let's see how it works. All right, so here I am. I got it all set up, and just using a ratchet, and as you can see there, this thing works in many configurations. I got it set here to pull the bearing and separate it off the spindle, and it worked very well. And they were really on there tight. Like, they've been on there. They might be original. And you can see there, they're just rusty, and they were basically frozen to the spindle, even though they spun pretty freely. So I'm going to see if I can get the other one off here. As you can see here, it pops off. But I'm going to see if I can actually maybe figure out a way to repack a sealed bearing. Or maybe not repack it, but at least get some oil into these bearings. So let's try that next. So I had to get these bearings clean. So what I did is I took a tray, put the bearings in there, sprayed them with WD-40, and the goal there was to get the rust off. And to do that, I had to use a brush. And as you can see here, you just kind of brush the bearings around and around until the rust came off. But the problem is you had to keep flushing it. So I would spin them around, pat them dry, and then basically rinse and repeat until and spin them until you just got them dry. And I try to get all the WD-40 out the best I can until they spun free. And as you can see there, eventually the oil came out pretty clean. Then I went to a 3-in-1 oil, and I kind of I put it around the rims, and I would massage it in, let it soak, flip it over, do the same thing again to the other side. And that was to try to get the WD-40 out, because you don't want to have WD-40 in the bearings long term. It'll eventually seize them up. So that was the goal there, to kind of flush it out with a 3-in-1 oil and get it into those seams there till it spun freely. So then I proceeded to try to soak these bearings in a heavyweight oil, which I then proceeded to put into an old olive jar, trying to recreate, I don't know, I guess like a mason jar, and hoping it would have a nice pressure fitting where it would suck the oil into the bearing once it was heated up. So let's fill it up and see how it works. So I missed the part where I filled it with oil, but basically I dropped the two bearings in there, filled it with the heavyweight chain bar oil, and then I used an old rubber glove to create a seal on the top just to be safe, and I put it in the boiling water for a bit. And what it did when it was boiling, it actually was putting pressure on the top there. As you can see, I pressed on it and you could feel the pressure building in there. And I guess my thought was, hey, I'm no scientist, but the oil, number one, is getting hot, right? So that's thinning it out, allowing it to soak into that bearing, and hopefully it won't come out. And the pressure just kept building, as you can see there, as I'm pressing on it. It just, I'm hoping that was forcing the oil into the bearing. So I pulled it out after a while and let it cool. And I actually did this a couple of times. And after I let it would cool each time, I would popped the top off and just released that pressure, and that's how I knew it had a good vacuum and sealed well. Now let's see how it came out. So I let them cool for a while in the oil, and the thought was, hey, as that oil is going to be cooling, hopefully it is going to be expanding, right? I pushed it in, it got hot and thin, and hopefully that heavyweight oil will stay in there. I did drain them for a while. I laid them on a clean paper towel, and as you can see there, they definitely leaked out a little excess oil. And then I flipped them over and let them dry for another half a day or so. And right now, I think, I've been keeping an eye on it. It seems like they're not leaking anymore as I'm checking the size. They're staying dry for the most part, and they sound better, and they are not spinning as freely, which is a good thing, believe it or not, because there is lube in there causing some friction. So I guess the only watch out is maybe in time, when it's spinning at a high RPM, it may blow out a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's a million times better. And if it was working with no oil, this will definitely last for many years to come. Now let's take a look at some painting. To get started, I'm using a self-etching primer, and that's really important to use on bare metal. And as you can see there, when I sanded down the paint, I got to some bare metal, so I figured, hey, let's use a self-etching primer. Here is just some real-time footage, or real speed footage, as I should say, on how I'm applying it. So just take a look. You just got to keep a good distance, and the key with primer is do not try to make the first coat too thick. So let's take a look here. Nice even coats. Do not try to cake it on. You got to be patient. The whole painting process is about patience. So it's worth noting, you want to make sure that you are shaking the can quite a bit, keeping that primer mixed up. And as you can see here, it's really helpful to use a hanger. And if you can hang the piece that you're painting, you can paint both sides at the same time, and then just hang it up to dry. So here I'm just putting a second coat on one of the side plates. Let's take a little look at that, and then we'll move on. I am just putting on a second coat of those two main housing compartments. Nice and easy, nice and even. Do not try to cake it on. Thin layers, let it dry properly in between each layer of paint. And it's worth mentioning, you might want to actually sand in between the layers of paint. If you feel like it's really smooth, the bare metal, and the paint has a sheen to it, you want to just give it a nice light sanding so the primer could adhere to it. But I did not have to do that here. So after letting it dry for a couple of days, I went to black paint. I'm using just a Rust-Oleum. This one has a little primer in it, and it's a semi-gloss black. I had about a quarter of a can left. So I said, hey, why not use the one that has a little primer in it to get it started? And then you'll see later I switched the paint to a Rust-Oleum semi-gloss paint, but it did not have the primer in it, and it was just fine. I just top coated it with that. So as you can see here, very similar to putting the primer on. Keep the distance, keep it on thin, and don't try to overdo it with your coats. Using the hanger to hold the piece makes it super easy, and just notice light coats. Don't try to nail it on the first pass. Just nice and easy, get all the spots, let it adhere, and then you'll end up doing that again. And then that's what I'm doing here, is putting that second coat on with the semi-gloss paint. It's a fresh can because I used up the other one, and this one does not have the primer in it. And as you can see here, that second coat really starts to take shape. And this is what I basically did for every part through the process that was black. And I'll show you how that came out here in a minute. It's also important to mention that I did not show it on film, but I did do a gloss finish. And that was very important to let the paint dry for a while. And then I went over it with several coats of gloss. And you'll see, I think it came out pretty well. And I'll show you what I did here with the other components that I did not paint black. So hopefully those are some helpful tips for you. So now that you've seen all the painting techniques, I want to show you how a lot of it came out, as well as a quick overview of the products. Like I mentioned, self-etching primer is usually very important when painting on raw metal. I usually use a Rust-Oleum product, but this was something I picked up at Harbor Freight, and it's actually made in the USA. And during COVID, it was hard to get paints and products, so I ended up buying some stuff from Harbor Freight that it's very similar. They even sell Rust-Oleum as well. So, like I mentioned earlier, I used a black Rust-Oleum paint. It had a little bit left with a primer in it, and those work okay, but I really like just a true paint. If I can have a good primer, it just seems to come out a little thinner, and it really has a little bit more deeper, richer color. That's just my opinion. And then here is a crystal clear enamel. This is basically a gloss enamel. It doesn't say it on it. Sometimes it says gloss. When you read the instructions, though, it actually says it's going to be a gloss. And this I put a ton on top of the paint. And you'll see here in a minute, I put probably, I don't know, 6 coats. And you could see the glisten that's coming off that black because of the amount of clear coat I put on it. And that is going to be a nice, thick, hardened coat. And just one thing I'll recommend there is don't put it on too soon. I've had it where I didn't wait long enough for the paint to dry, and then it would either orange peel because it was still releasing gases, the paint, or I've even had it where I put the clear coat on in a way it was too heavy at first and didn't put a nice thin coat on first and build it up. And then it looked great, and then it just sagged on me, and then my heart just sunk because I had to let it dry, sand, and it just created a lot of problems. So just be patient, especially with the clear coat. One thin clear coat to start, then go to your other coats. Now, the next thing I want to show you is this really cool paint. I had no idea what colors I wanted to do the other components. It had like a cheesy gold paint on it, and I wanted to do something that kind of looked like it would go well with the black. And I just started digging through some paints I had, and I've had this can of paint, I can't even tell you, for years. I've never used it. Picked it up at a garage sale, and it's called a Rust-Oleum Hammered, and it's like a brownish color, and it's got that nice little marbling in it. And this here, it says on the instructions you could go right over rust with it. No surface, hide surface imperfections, no primer needed. And I said, you know what, after all the other work I did on these other ones, that sounds like a really good solution, because these things were beat up, they were rough. So what I did, just quick sand, wiped it down with alcohol. I always clean everything with alcohol first and mineral spirits, and then I painted it with that. I put 2 coats, sometimes in some cases where maybe I put 3 just to get that nice even marbling, and then I clear coated the daylights out of it. This probably has about 4 coats. The black I did 6, and most of the brown products, as you could see there, I went with about 4, and it was just made it real simple work of this lamp bendable thing. It was all rusted up and shoddy. I sanded it real quick. It came out great. Couple coats of clear coat, looks wonderful. I taped it off. I took this apart. I didn't show all that, but I just in sections painted it, and I think it's gonna work. I don't know. I should have probably checked it and put a light bulb in it before taking it out, but it's a simple design, and I can't imagine it won't work. Here's the glass shades. Took the glass out, cleaned it, put it all back in, and painted that with the nice brown as well. So there it is. At the end, I'll show you the B side of that. This is the B side. The A side, I had to come up with the solution for the emblem, and I'll show you what I did. Let's keep moving along. Now that you've seen the paint, let's put this baby back together. Here is the actual date it was manufactured, March 17th, 1965. Found that when I was putting it back together. Didn't take a lot of video putting it back together because it basically goes back the same way it came apart that you saw. But make sure that coil assembly goes in the correct way. Originally, I put it in reversed, and the motor was spinning the wrong direction, had to swing it around. Here you can see I put a new wire on there as well with a little bit of solder and a quick connect. And there's just my new SK pliers, and it's coming along, and there is the nameplate. So let's see what I did to correct that. All All right, there it is. It is completed, and there is the logo. So I could not replace the logos. They were pretty beat up, as you can remember. There was no way of salvaging it. So I stuck the Tom Gunn logo on there. This thing is pretty much 100% made in the USA, and I just clear coated over it. Really happy with the way it came out. Cleaned the glass up. There's a little crack in this one piece of glass, but it looks worse on the camera than it really does. And functionally, it's fine. It's just a hairline crack, and it's in there. I used a piece of draw liner that you would use in a toolbox to make a gasket. And then I just, after I folded the tabs under, I just put a little dab of silicone in each corner just to hold it put. But otherwise, it came out good. All these pieces, I used the belt sander on, ground them down. All the hardware that you see that's cleaned up was really just done with a fiber wheel or a wire wheel on a bench grinder. And I didn't really show a lot of that. There's nothing really to all that. And putting this back together, like I mentioned, really not much to it. But what I do want to do is run it for you real quick because I want to try something. When I ran this without the wheels on it, smooth as butter. I mean, you could hold it on a pinky. Once I put the wheels on it, it started to, have a little bit of vibration and whatnot. And as you can see here, I mounted it down to a nice board. I got the board clamped down to the bench, and it still has a pretty good vibration. And my theory is it's this cheap Harbor Freight wheel out of here. It almost looks out of alignment by eye. So I want to run that, and I'll show you what it looks like. And then I'm going to replace it with a higher quality 60 grit, I believe it's Fournet wheel, the same brand that I put on this side in the 36 grit. And I'm hoping that really smooths it out. But this is what the Harbor Freight wheel with it on it looks like. Not terrible. I mean, it is pretty smooth, but you could feel the vibration. And when I didn't have the brackets on it, it did want to walk a little bit and slide a little. Now, notice this here. When it slows down, you hear the vibration. It really seems like it's coming from that side. Not terrible, usable, but I want to see if I can, with the amount of work I put in this, if I can make it really fine-tuned with a really true wheel, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to replace that. The other thing I wanted you to take note of, did you see how quick it wound down compared to when I ran it in the beginning, when it would run for over a minute? That's because the oil's in those bearings, and the oil seems to be really holding in there. I ran it prior, and then I took it apart, and the oil was not strewn all over. So I think that process I did with the oil works. Here it is with the new wheel, smooth as butter. Gets up to full speed, shut it down. I'm actually gonna run it real quick on here with the clamps not on it. I bet you this thing will stay perfectly put. Now here it winds down. Zero vibration. So here, long and short of it is, you can get some decent things at Harbor Freight. That wheel was $5. This wheel was $16. This wheel was $18, the Fournet. These are still made overseas, similar to the Harbor Freight, but just a much higher quality. I was really looking to try to find some USA-made wheels, and I'm sure they're out there, but they're a little hard to find, and they're probably pretty expensive. So I'm into these wheels for about, what, 36, 38 bucks at this point with tax. So I have that into it, plus paint. So I'm about $50 into this project, not to mention a brand new cord. So altogether, I'm about $50, and I spent $25 on it. For 75 bucks, I got myself one hell of a piece of equipment. So let's just take one more quick look at this in some better light and see how pretty she came out. All right, guys, one last look at this bench grinder in some better light here. The black is unforgiving, so you could see there's some spots where I probably could have sanded the castings a little better, especially when you're going to put a lot of gloss on it. But we have a saying, my dad always says, a man running for his life would never notice, and that is the case with this. And I'm positive it looks better than it looked when it was made. That is for sure. Really loved that brown paint. Did a really nice job covering all of that, especially on the bendable stuff. Came out great. Over here you can see I got the new cord that I put on it. That was really important. Have to do a better job of like Scoutcraft. Or just cutting them off out of the trash. It would have saved me about $6 or $8. So whenever I see an old appliance, I'm going to snag one. Would have taken some money off the project. I do have this really cool drill grinding attachment to get just the right angles on bits, and that's primarily what I'm going to use this for. So I can't wait to set that up. That is a nice old piece of vintage hardware that I look forward to using. And the Tom Gunn logo, hey, it came out great. I am going to get an on and off sticker for here. They're just on order, has not come in yet. I did clear coat over this, so it is on there for generations to come. One day someone's going to say, who the heck was Tom Gunn? No idea, but it is a hell of a bench grinder, because this will outlast me for a long time. So in this video, hopefully you learned a couple of cool new things. I really spent some time going into the bearings, which was kind of experimental for me. Took you through some of the real painting process, so hopefully that was helpful as well. So if you like this type of content, if you like tool restorations, if you like tool reviews, and if you like tool hauls, please like and subscribe. Really appreciate the support. You could go to Tom Gunn Tools on gmail.com, and I'll send you, just shoot me your email address and I'll mail you out some stickers. I got some nice channel stickers. As you can see there, they got the wrench in the eagle's mouth. Very patriotic. So even if you don't like Tom Gunn, I'm sure you like America, and you got a cool sticker there. And I'll send you out one of these as well. So I'll leave you with that. Remember, the world has enough guys. Be a man. All right. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.